Okay, let's talk about solo shows versus two-handers or multiple people on the show. So you might be thinking, am I going to do a show by myself or should I do a show with someone else or more than one person? And that comes down to different things. It comes down to, first of all, what the idea is, what your show is. So, again, going back to the dog podcast idea that we've been discussing, obviously, as I've said, it's a subject matter that I am fascinated by and want to learn more about. But I don't feel like just me doing that show by myself would be a good move because, firstly, I could say, well, that's right. I can just every episode have an expert on to talk about whatever the subject matter is for that particular episode. And yes, I could do that, but that puts you under a lot of pressure to find someone for every episode. So if I wanted to do more than one episode a week, maybe I could say to the person I'm getting on, you could potentially say, hey, look, can we cover a few subjects? And then you chop those up into different episodes. That's one way you could handle it if you couldn't find anyone that wanted to do the show with you. You could definitely do it that way. But you would have to be well and truly prepared in advance. You'd have to work out whether, okay, so the first 5 episodes are going to be with this trainer, and we're going to talk about XYZ. And then while those episodes you've recorded those, edited them, and scheduled them, while they're going out, you've got your next trainer, you're recording your next set of questions, and you just go through that process. Or you go, well, do I do one episode with this guy, then an episode with this lady, and then, jumping backward and forward between different trainers. That is one way you could do it. In my head, I'm thinking it sounds like a lot of work. Plus, there's a lot of change constantly. So people might get used to hearing that one person for 5 episodes that you've had on the dog trainer and really enjoying what they're talking about and liking them. And all of a sudden you change to someone they don't like that much. And they're like, oh, I don't really like this person. So it can become a little bit disjointed. So I would definitely, as I've said, I would definitely err on the side of finding someone who would do the show with me on a regular basis. Someone who was happy to come on board. And I think you would, you might say that, but I don't know if that's going to work or they might not be keen. You don't know unless you ask. And dog trainers are like anyone; they've got to find clients. So, what better way to advertise their business than through a podcast? And you can say, "Look, I'll handle all the editing and everything like that. I just need you to come and be the expert and to answer questions and to sit there and us have a back and forth chat." Now, the other issue with that is you've got to find someone that you gel with, which is it can be hard. It can be very hard to find someone that you actually gel with and you get on with, because you want to have a rapport with that person, obviously, because if someone turns up and they're an absolute douche and you're just like, oh no, what have I done? This person's terrible. So, I would, if you're going down that route, find someone, maybe find a few people, email a couple of people, 2 or 3 people, tell them what your idea is, tell them that you'd love to do a podcast with a dog trainer. You've got in touch with a few different dog trainers to sort of, trial and see who you can gel with first. Be honest with them, so I want to find someone I can really gel with. And have little tryouts. If you're that lucky that, all these people have said, yeah, we'd love to do it, then, do some trials and choose someone you get along with. So that's how I would handle that particular situation. Of course, you can do a solo show by yourself. I do one show. Well, I mean, all of my shows are generally solo. I have people that join me on a regular basis. I have the inmates that I talk to. I have the attorney guy who comes on the 1 Minute Remaining show. But he's not always on regularly, but he is fantastic. I mean, I've struck gold finding him. I can literally message him and say, hey, can we record this week? And he'll make time and he'll sit down and record with me for half an hour, 45 minutes. He's fantastic talent. He's a great talker. We have a laugh. We generally just get along, but we obviously don't spend a lot of time together. It's only, maybe once a month. But he's just brilliant. So I really lucked out. I lucked out? Is that what you're saying? That doesn't sound like a good term, does it? Anyway, I was very lucky finding him. So you can do a solo show, especially if you know a lot about the topic. So if I was to do a podcast about radio or podcasting, I could just do it by myself. I think it's nice to have someone to bounce off. Obviously a lot of my shows, all of them apart from Crime at Bedtime, are interview shows. So there's always someone else involved, someone I'm talking to. So it is that backward and forward conversation because I enjoy that. I enjoy that interaction, that interview, asking the questions and hearing someone's story. So you can definitely do it that way. You can, and you can do a solo show. So if you're an expert on, the topic that you're going to be talking about, if you're a doctor in psychology and you want to do a podcast about psychology, you can just do a show by yourself and maybe occasionally bring in someone else to have a chat about whatever topic. If you're not particularly strong on a certain aspect of psychology, you bring in someone who is. I'm sure, if you're in that field, you know plenty of people and you say, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm building a podcast and I'd love you to be involved. So, yeah. And if you think about doing a podcast, again, two-handed podcast with a mate, because you guys get along really well. There's plenty of those podcasts that work very well in the past and still continue to work really well. Alpha Blokes is a perfect example. Two blokes who are just mates who love having a laugh and a chat started a podcast and it's extremely successful. So just make sure that whoever you are bringing in to do the podcast with you, that they are as passionate and excited about it as you, because obviously you can get into that situation where you might punch out 50, 60, maybe even 100 episodes. And it might be struggling to get momentum at the start, but it's like with anything, you've just got to keep showing up. So you need to find someone who is not going to all of a sudden pull the pin after episode 30, 40, 50, whatever, and say, I don't really want to do this anymore, because then you're up shit creek without a paddle, because you've built this show, two-hander show, and then I do see this a lot actually in podcast forums, a lot of people saying, oh, the person I was doing the show with, they decided they don't want to do it anymore. I don't know whether to go on by myself, start a new podcast. So it can be tricky. I personally have been in a situation where I started a podcast with someone and, they were going through some things in life and, it was just we couldn't get our schedules aligned, and I'd be messaging saying, hey, can we record this week? They'd have something on, and which is a shame because it was such a fun, I really enjoyed it, but that's just the way it happens sometimes. So if you're going to, think about doing a two-hander podcast, just find someone who is as committed and excited about the idea as you are. And that you have a connection. If they're already a mate, fantastic. If you already, have a lot in common and have a laugh with each other down the pub or wherever, go play golf, fantastic. So it just comes down to what the deciding factor of who's going to be involved in the show comes down to, number one, what the show is, what it's about. Does it need more than one person? Does it need guests? Does it need, but start with the idea and then go from there. Obviously, you get two people involved, you need double the equipment because you need two microphones, and so obviously that all comes into play as well. So, but hopefully, if someone's going to get involved with the podcast with you, then maybe you'd like to think that they might buy their own microphone and whatnot. So that's basically it when it comes to solo shows or doubles. There's obviously been some extremely successful solo podcasts of people who are just them, but with guests to keep rolling through. I would look at having, if you are going to do a solo show, try and do one where you do have regular guests involved. Of course, you can do episodes where it's just you talking about something. But again, for the audience's ears, that can be quite tiring just listening to the one person. My Crime at Bedtime show is just me telling a story. But people know what they're getting when they come to listen to the show. It's literally a show to relax people, and hopefully they fall asleep to it at night. So it's just me telling a story, basically. So you can do that as well if you wanted to, if you loved history or something like that, and you just want to tell history stories about battles or, anything like that. You can do that. And I love those types of shows too, because again, going back to the editing side of things and the production, you can add so much production value to a show like that if it's just you telling a story, especially something history or something like that, using battle sounds and all the rest of it. I mean, that's fun, that part. So yeah, that's solo or double handers or, 5 people. I don't know if I would stretch to 5 people in a show. 3 would probably be, in my head, the maximum. You go any more than 3, start having 4 or 5 people, you've just got a lot of voices all trying to get airtime, trying to talk, and it can be confusing for people listening. you know, yeah, don't make the mistake that Today FM breakfast in Sydney. For those who don't know, in Sydney there's a radio station called Today FM, and when they lost their major show, Carl and Jackie O, this big breakfast show, they suddenly brought in like 5 big personalities on the show, and it just didn't work because there's people just fighting for airtime. So I definitely wouldn't go more than 3 people if you're planning on doing a multi-person show. So yeah, hope that helps.